Hey everyone! Today I'm summarizing The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is my summary with spoilers, so if you haven't read it, watch carefully. Link to the book is below. Clementine West is a publicist who has devoted most of her time to work, mostly because she wants to distract herself. Her friends, Fiona and Drew, also make sure she's okay. This is because her aunt recently passed away 6 months ago. Clementine seemed to be heartbroken. Clementine moved into her aunt's apartment, which her aunt left to her in her will. She's still unpacking her things. Most of them are still in boxes. She's good at what she does, and had even talked to her boss, Rhonda, about canceling her time off. Rhonda declined the cancellation and advised Clementine to use the day off, as she rarely takes any time off throughout the year. Clementine originally took the day off to travel with her aunt, but since her aunt passed away, she no longer felt the need to go. She just planned to distract herself with work. When she's not working or going out to eat with friends, she spends her time at home unpacking. One day, when she returned to her apartment, she noticed everything looked different. Her boxes were gone. Instead, the apartment looked the way it used to like when her aunt was still alive. To her surprise, a man was there. She freaked out at first, but managed to talk to him and clarify who he was. His name is Ewan. He is the son of a close friend of her aunt's. He told Clementine that her aunt was away on a trip and had allowed him to stay at the apartment while he looked for a job. Clementine was confused. What Ewan was saying didn't make sense. Her aunt was already dead. But then, everything around her didn't make sense either. Clementine checked the date on her phone and realized she was in a different timeline. It was 7 years ago. 7 years ago, her aunt was traveling in Norway with a younger Clementine, who was around 22 at the time. Present-day Clementine is 29. Clementine and Ewan talked, but even though she had figured out that she was 7 years ahead of the current timeline, she didn't tell him. She was afraid he wouldn't believe her. At first, Clementine tried to get Ewan to leave the apartment, but she eventually decided to let him stay. In this timeline, her aunt was still alive and had allowed Ewan to stay there, so it didn't feel right to go against her aunt's decision. So Ewan stayed, and they eventually became friends. He cooked for her, and they enjoyed each other's company in the kitchen. Clementine, who isn't fond of cooking, appreciated it. It was the weekend, and Clementine didn't have to work. One day, while Ewan was out applying for jobs, Clementine stayed home and painted with watercolors. She got lost in thought while painting, until Ewan came back and cooked for her again. That time, they had frozen pizza and lemon pie. They had fun, and tried to ignore the awkwardness or chemistry between them so things wouldn't be weird. When it was time to sleep, they decided they were both adults and could sleep in the same bed, instead of Clementine sleeping on the couch as she originally offered. They slept in the same bed, with a pillow placed between them. Clementine explained to Ewan that she was staying at the apartment because her own apartment nearby was infested with pigeons, so she couldn't stay there. During the first few days of Ewan being there, Clementine tried to return to the present. She would leave the room and come back, hoping that when she returned, Ewan would be gone and she'd be back in her own timeline. But it didn't work. It was as if the apartment decided on its own when to bring her back to Ewan. Eventually, though, she did return to the present. She didn't control it, it just happened. She went back to work as normal. Her friends noticed she seemed different, more glowing. Fiona even asked Kat to talk to her because Clementine hadn't replied to their messages over the weekend, and they were worried. Clementine checked her phone and found that it hadn't restarted properly. She also noticed unread messages from her friends. That's when she realized her phone doesn't work when she's 7 years in the past with Ewan. She made up excuses, saying she had just been very busy unpacking. However, Fiona kept bugging her with questions because Clementine was acting unusually. Knowing how persistent Fiona is, Clementine vaguely told her what happened over the weekend. She said she met someone named Ewan and spent the weekend with him. Then she realized she didn't know Ewan's last name. She had been planning to look him up online to find out where he might be now, 7 years later. Fiona told her to make sure she gets his last name the next time they see each other. However, when Clementine went back to the apartment after that workday, Ewan was no longer there. The apartment had returned to its current state. Her boxes and unpacked belongings were scattered around. She carried on with life as usual, but she couldn't stop thinking about Iwan. She admitted to herself that she was physically attracted to him and that they had shared some memorable moments in that apartment. Her friend Drew, who also works with her, was handling a project involving a famous author who's also a chef. There was a lot of pressure because several publishers were trying to sign him. At the same time, Clementine's boss, Rhonda, was retiring and had nominated Clementine to take over her position. Successfully helping Drew close the deal with this author would significantly support Clementine's promotion. Before the meeting with the author, Clementine read an article he had written sent by Drew for her to review beforehand. As she read it, the words sounded oddly familiar. They reminded her of Iwan. At the bottom of the article, she was shocked to see that the author was, in fact, Iwan. He looked different, but she could still recognize him. 7 years had passed, after all. Clementine prepared herself for the meeting, trying to stay composed. No one else knew what had happened between her and Iwan. During the meeting, Iwan, now known publicly as James Ashton, appeared calm and unaffected by her presence. Clementine, on the other hand, was nervous. Her feelings were still fresh, as it had only been a few weeks for her since she last saw him, while it had been 7 years for him. They briefly made eye contact a few times during the meeting. What stood out most for Clementine was the moment when everyone else had left the room, and only she and Iwan remained. He was slowly packing up his things, and she waited for him to leave first since he was the important client. As he walked past her to leave, he whispered, "It's nice to see you again, Lemon," his old nickname for her. Clementine was under a lot of pressure to win Iwan over. Their company was small, and they were up against larger publishers who also wanted to sign him. She was somewhat confident, though, because their offer was strong. Iwan's process for choosing a publisher involved selecting a few finalists to participate in a cooking lesson, after which he would make his decision. Clementine was surprised to learn they hadn't been pre-selected for the next round. Determined, she gathered the courage to talk to Iwan. She believed that although he had changed, the man she had bonded with years ago was still in there somewhere. During their conversation, Iwan revealed he thought Clementine didn't want to work with him. She clarified the misunderstanding, and they were able to talk things through. Clementine reminded him of their connection, and Iwan reconsidered. Eventually, their company was added to the list for the cooking class. Clementine attended the cooking lesson along with Drew, who was leading the project. Neither of them was very skilled in the kitchen, but they enjoyed the experience. After the class, Drew left early because her Uber arrived first, while Clementine waited outside Iwan's new restaurant. As she waited, Iwan appeared beside her. They chatted for a bit and decided to catch up. Iwan asked if she was hungry, and they ended up walking to a food truck owned by Iwan's old friend, a lovely couple who had been his classmates in culinary school. During the outing, Iwan introduced Clementine as Lemon, and his friends addressed her that way too. At one point in the conversation, the topic shifted to how Iwan had once met a girl he couldn't stop talking about. They tried to remember the name of the girl Iwan couldn't stop talking about. Then they finally recalled her name was the same as a song. Her name was Clementine. Clementine was surprised and tried to change the subject, but she was genuinely flattered. It meant a lot to her that Iwan really hadn't stopped talking about her before. As they walked home, Clementine asked Iwan to clarify, and he confirmed that there was only one Clementine in his life. He admitted that he truly couldn't stop thinking about her. There was tension between them. They almost gave in to it. But Iwan clarified that Clementine was off limits because he was still their client. It wouldn't be right to get involved, as it could start rumors among the other publishers. So, Clementine went home that night with a strong yearning for Iwan. But when she entered her apartment, it unexpectedly led her back to Iwan, back to 7 years ago, where Iwan was drinking and clearly missing someone. Each time the apartment brought Clementine back to the past, Iwan acted like it was normal, like he had accepted her sudden appearances. Every time Clementine arrived, Iwan would simply say, "Oh, you're here," or "You're back," and Clementine would respond with something like, "Yeah, the apartment isn't ready yet," or "I just thought I'd visit." 7 years ago, Iwan believed that Clementine was renting somewhere else nearby and staying at her aunt's apartment temporarily. During one of those visits, they talked and ended up sleeping together. The next time Clementine and Iwan met in the present day, it was just a day later. Clementine and her friends had planned to dine at a restaurant, but it was either closed or too crowded, and they didn't have a reservation. So they looked for another place and ended up at the food truck Clementine had recommended. While they were there, she saw Iwan. It was actually the day after she had seen him. She didn't point him out to her friends because she didn't want them to assume she suggested the food truck just to see Iwan. Iwan was there, and they ended up chatting while Clementine was getting a drink. During the conversation, Iwan noticed a hickey on Clementine's neck. He was surprised and said something like, "Oh, you had another date?" Clementine didn't respond, but she didn't have to because Iwan realized that 7 years ago, that was the time they first slept together. They both blushed. Iwan went back to the food truck, and Clementine rejoined her friends. Clementine later shared with her friends that she had received a letter at the apartment addressed to her aunt. It was from Vera. Her aunt had once told her about the magic of the apartment, how it worked, and now Clementine believed it. She remembered her aunt's stories but had never been sure if they were real or just imaginative tales told to entertain her. Now, experiencing it herself, she believed the stories were true. Her aunt had once visited the apartment and, back then, met Vera 7 years in the past. They talked, hung out, and eventually fell in love. However, when they tried to reconnect 7 years later, in her aunt's present, Vera was already married. It turned out that Vera wanted to have a family and children, so Clementine's aunt let Vera go. They still kept in touch through letters. Vera eventually had a husband and 2 children. When Clementine received Vera's letter, she felt it wasn't right to read it. It was personal, meant for her aunt. After talking with her friends, she decided the best thing to do was to return the letter in person and also let Vera know what had happened to her aunt. She asked her friends to accompany her, but they didn't go inside. Clementine knocked on Vera's door and spoke to her. Vera was alone. Clementine handed her the letter and shared the sad news that her aunt had passed away. Vera cried. She didn't know. She had known Clementine's aunt very well. She understood. Clementine's aunt had died by suicide. Though she had led a colorful life, always traveling and appearing carefree, she had been fighting something inside. Clementine had grown up with a good life, thanks to her aunt, but she realized there had been a hidden struggle. There was a monster in her aunt's mind that she kept fighting. One day, that monster may have won. Her aunt died sleeping on a chair. It happened during New Year's. Her neighbors had called the police for a wellness check because she hadn't answered when they kept knocking. During that wellness check, they found her. It was assumed that she had taken pills, possibly sleeping pills, as she had recently consulted a doctor about trouble sleeping. Actually, there was never any confirmation whether Clementine's aunt had done it on purpose or if it had been an accident, but that was how Clementine's aunt died. Vera and Clementine talked for a while. As Clementine was about to leave Vera's apartment, Vera mentioned that they should talk more soon. She had many stories she wanted to share. On her way out, Clementine saw some family photos. Vera explained the people in them. First, there was a photo of a woman named Lily, and next, a photo of a man in a chef's uniform. To Clementine's surprise, it was James Ashton Iwan. It turned out that James is Vera's son, which made sense. When Clementine had first met Iwan, he said he was the son of a close friend of her aunt's. Clementine hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it all made sense. She didn't share any details with Vera about already knowing James. Vera simply said it would be nice if Clementine could meet her son sometime. Later, at the opening of James's new restaurant, Clementine attended along with her co-workers and other publicists. Vera was there too. Clementine greeted her, and when Vera introduced her to Lily, James's sister, she even offered for Clementine to sit with them. Clementine politely declined, as she already had a seat with her colleagues. During the restaurant opening, Clementine and Iwan had a chance to talk. Their conversation grew serious. Clementine admitted she felt things were wrong between them. She believed Iwan had changed, that he was no longer the same person she had bonded with 7 years ago. For example, she recalled how Iwan once said that the joy of food comes from the people you share it with. But now, Looking around the restaurant, Clementine noticed people weren't laughing or talking animatedly, they were just scrolling on their phones, seemingly disconnected. She pointed this out, saying that maybe the restaurant had lost its warmth. Clementine went on about how important it is for Iwan to remember who he is and ensure he's truly happy. However, her timing was off. She brought this up during the launch of his new restaurant, which should have been a moment of celebration. She was also disappointed that the friends Iwan used to cook with at the food truck weren't there. But a few moments later, she saw Miguel and Lily greeting her cheerfully, and she realized how wrong she had been. Iwan hadn't changed, he had simply learned how to carry himself differently in various settings. She felt disappointed in herself, afraid that she had pushed Iwan away with what she said. Before Clementine could go back to her apartment, a commotion broke out at her table. Fiona, who is Drew's wife, had gone into labor. Clementine and her co-workers, including Juliet, rushed Fiona to the hospital. Despite the chaos, Clementine still felt awful about her last conversation with Iwan. She feared she had ruined their chances of being selected as his publisher. Eventually, Clementine returned to her aunt's apartment, and once again, it transported her back in time. Iwan was there and understanding, though full of questions. He asked if Clementine was a ghost, because the last time they were together, they had slept together, and afterward he had encouraged her to get some air outside. When she left the apartment, she simply vanished. Clementine had no choice but to tell Iwan the truth. She hesitated, but Iwan encouraged her. "Just try me." So Clementine told him everything, how she was from the future, and that they were actually 7 years apart. Surprisingly, Iwan believed her. After all, how else could he explain her vanishing into thin air? They talked, and Iwan even suggested that maybe they should just live together in the apartment, never leave it, and just be together. But they both knew that wasn't realistic. It wasn't a real life. They needed to move forward and trust that if they were meant to meet again, they would. Clementine gave Iwan some encouragement. At that time, he was just a dishwasher and unsure about his future. Clementine told him to keep going, that he would become someone amazing. That gave Iwan hope. She didn't tell him they'd end up together, only that they would meet again someday. That was the last time the apartment brought them together. Iwan walked out the door. Clementine knew she should be returning to her present, but she lingered. She had a feeling that this was the last time she'd experience the apartment's magic. She wanted to savor it a little longer, in a time where her aunt was still alive, traveling somewhere with Clementine's younger self. As she wandered around the apartment, she heard the door slam. She laughed, assuming it was Iwan forgetting his toothbrush again, an excuse he had once used to return after leaving. But when she turned and saw who it was, she became emotional. It was her aunt. The book didn't say it clearly, but it was heavily implied. And her aunt, upon seeing her, knew immediately that she was the older Clementine. They shared a moment together. Meanwhile, outside, Iwan hailed a cab and ended up accidentally sharing it with someone else. When he got in, he saw a sad and confused young woman. It was the 22-year-old Clementine, fresh from a trip with her aunt. She was absent-minded, heartbroken, and unsure about her future after college. She didn't notice Iwan in the cab, didn't recognize him, didn't remember him afterward. She was too lost in her own world. During the ride, Iwan gave her advice. Do what you love. That simple conversation stuck with her. Clementine was holding a travel guide at the time, and afterward, she decided she wanted to work in publishing. She later shared that with Juliet while they waited for Fiona in the hospital's delivery room. Juliet was upset. She'd seen a photo of her boyfriend kissing another girl and tried to shrug it off. Clementine told her she deserved better. Juliet asked, "What if I don't find someone else?" And Clementine replied, "What if you do?" That conversation gave Juliet the strength to break up with her boyfriend. And it also helped Clementine realize she wasn't happy with her job anymore. It was no longer fulfilling. So she decided to quit. She told Rhonda, who at first she was afraid to disappoint. But Rhonda was supportive. She told Clementine that it also took her some time to figure out what she truly wanted, and that it was good that Clementine was discovering herself. On her birthday, Clementine celebrated the same way she always did, by visiting the Van Gogh painting her aunt loved. She went with her friends, Fiona, Drew, their daughter Penelope and Juliet. While they celebrated, Fiona went to the bathroom to care for the baby, leaving Clementine alone. She stood in front of the painting, deep in thought. Drew appeared beside Clementine and handed her a small package. It was something Clementine had received before from her aunt. At the time, Clementine had been in a bad place emotionally. Frustrated and overwhelmed, she had impulsively thrown the package away in the heat of the moment. Later, she regretted it and even went back to the trash to look for it, but it was gone. She assumed it had been taken or discarded and quietly accepted the loss. Now, as Drew gave it to her, Clementine realized what had happened. Drew had seen her throw it away and decided to keep it safe, knowing she might want it back when she was ready. Clementine was deeply thankful. She hadn't meant to throw it away. She had just been having a rough day. She opened the package and found a travel guide inside for Iceland. It was a trip her aunt had planned for them. There was also a letter. In it, her aunt encouraged her to go, even if she herself couldn't be there. It was clear that her aunt had prepared this for her in advance, just in case. The gesture struck Clementine deeply. Drew had already gone back to Fiona, and Juliet was still walking around the museum, taking in the art for the first time. Clementine remained seated in front of the Van Gogh painting, her birthday tradition. She thought about why this painting had been her aunt's favorite. Maybe it was because, like her aunt, Van Gogh had fought monsters in his mind. She was so absorbed in thought that she didn't notice the man who sat beside her until some children nearby asked him a question about the painting. When he answered, she recognized his voice. It was James Iwan. He was holding a sunflower, her favorite flower. Iwan greeted her gently. He told her that, for years, he had thought about approaching her at this very place on her birthday. He had even considered visiting during those years they were apart, but something always told him that it wasn't the right time. He wanted their reunion to happen when it was truly meant to. So he waited. 7 years later, on this birthday, he came. They sat together in quiet understanding. Clementine apologized again this time for what she had said at his restaurant during the opening. 7 years ago, when she last apologized in the apartment, Iwan hadn't even known what she meant. Now, he understood. He accepted the apology. Then he asked her to dinner. That night, they dined at his restaurant that looked a little different than it had before. Iwan told her he had made a few changes after what she had said back then. Though she had been wrong about many things, she had also been right about some. He'd taken her words to heart and made the space warmer, more personal, more alive. Drew later confirmed that Iwan had officially accepted their publishing proposal. Despite being courted by larger companies, he chose to work with their small firm. It was a huge win for Themin, though Clementine had already resigned from the company. Clementine and Iwan, now finally reunited in the present, decided to move in together. They packed up the apartment together, the one that had connected their timelines, their pasts, and their futures. It was time to move on. This time, they weren't parting. This time, they were together. That's it for the 7-year slip. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, the book link is in my bio. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other summaries.